Hi, this is Clarence Moye here with Deborah Kampmeier, director of What the Papers Say, which is the second episode of the fantastic third season of The Gilded Age, of course. Deborah, we haven't spoken since season two, so it's such a pleasure to speak with you again.
It's such a pleasure, Clarence. I'm happy to be here with you again.
So obviously, I've been a fan of this series since the first season. Every season takes on a little bit more, it becomes a little bit more confident, and of course I love every season, but this one felt different to me. This one felt like maybe it's the theming of marriage and divorce, and I don't know, this one I feel like you guys knocked it out of the park in just brilliant ways this year. Did you
Mm.
feel different when you were sitting down to take a look at the scripts that you would direct, across the season? Did you feel that this was something unique about this season?
It's interesting. I think what was different initially was that I was coming back to the show, right? So when I came into season two, there was a lot of work I had to do in terms of the immense amount of research around this show and,
Mm-hmm.
really digging into the world. And so for me, it was very different to come back to a show where, it was like coming back to family and being a part of this team. And so that was quite different. I think that, to your point about it being, like we're always trying to top ourselves, right? But there was
Mm-hmm.
something about this material, and like I said, the research that went into it, where we really had to establish the world for the audience, right? Like, many of us have read Edith Wharton and, Age of Innocence, but um there's so much, like so many people I talk to are like, I have no idea about the history of New York at this
Mm-hmm.
particular period of time. And so I think bringing our audience into the world was a lot of the work, certainly for season one, and building on that world in season two. And I think now the world has been so created that now we get to really play in it. And I
Yeah.
think, playing with exactly what you said: marriage, divorce, love, 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 heartbreak, and then, of course, all of the ambition that is always there. So I think, like, just getting to play now because we've really established what this world is part of what, is fun about it. And, raising the stakes so high so that we can, up it again this season just makes it really fun.
Absolutely. And I don't know if we mentioned this last time we met, but Age of Innocence, one of my favorite books and one of my favorite films of all time. It's back. There's a poster back here behind me. I don't know if you can see. I don't know if my giant head is in the way, but I have an affinity for this period of history. I don't know what it is, but I vibe with it extensively.
Yeah. It's so romantic, right? There's a romance about it,
Mhm.
and so the grandeur of it is really fun to step into, I think, as an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of grandeur, that's actually an excellent segue into my the first area I wanted to talk about, which is the way you start the episode. There's a couple of quick shots. One is a static shot down the hallway of the Russell mansion, and it's Adelheid running back and forth, trying to find Gladys, who we know from last episode has run out in the middle of the night because she doesn't want to get married to the Duke. She wants to marry for love. And Adelheid is running back and forth between the rooms looking for it. It's almost like a Scooby Doo moment. I love that scene. And then after that static shot, you then give us the foyer, but in a way that we've not seen before, where the camera kind of cranes down the hallway and then pulls back, and you've got this impossible angle. Talk to me about those opening shots.
Yeah, well, I wanted that, first of all, that first shot of Adelheid. It's so fun. Like, I would crack up while we were shooting it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like just the stillness of the morning, also, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's early, right? And so it's still, and then suddenly this panic ensues, and we're actually ahead of everyone else at this point. So, we know what they're frantic about. And we know that Gladys has left the house. And I think that it was also just an opportunity to have all of these characters looking for her, which, was something we expanded from what was, written in the script. Was really Adelheid running down the stairs, was how the script began. But to be able to really open up into the space and remind everyone what this world is that Gladys is, trapped in, if you will, and the size of the Russells, home, estate, fortune, like to really lay that out again and remind everyone of this space. And so to really take advantage of all these different spaces and how we'll, reveal them and show them and have our different, um, our different characters moving through them in a way where we can, take advantage of these incredible spaces and just to say, I think, gosh, I should have counted, but I think maybe we were certainly in many different rooms, but we were in the Russell house is, we use the stages, we use Homes Newport, we use, homes on Long Island, it's like a whole thing. So it was really fun to grab those shots also when we could, like we would be shooting in, I don't know, the billiard room and then get that shot where we go through the billiard room, and we're shooting in the kitchen. So we get the shot in the kitchens that day. So it was just really fun to try and see how much we could, reveal of this home using this, looking for Gladys moment.
Yeah. And, it's any opportunity that I can get to showcase Bob Shaw's incredible work as production designer, because I love talking to him. Every year I've talked to him. I love talking to him because he always, I get such a kick out of saying, oh, you mean so when you leave the billiard room, for example, that's in one house in Newport, right. And then you enter, the hallway, and that's on a stage, but he creates it so seamlessly that it's just you think it's all one big massive house, and it's really not. It's right. Kind of being piecemealed together.
Yeah, like that hall that Adelaide's running down. And then you see her come down the staircase. That goes from that house in Newport to our stages. That foyer Bob created. I mean, that is amazing, right? And it was so fun, that final shot of really pulling her around and back and having everyone converge. That was really this fun moment to create and bring that big crane in onto the stage and really create that final moment of convergence of all of these people looking for Gladys.
And it's a great way to start that episode too, because it gives it like a jolt of energy in a way that maybe period pieces traditionally don't have. So it's a great way to approach it differently.
Where are you going?
The servants' entrance.
No, we have been asked to come here. We are going through the front door.
Arthur, please, let's not make a fuss. We need to see our daughter.
Don't you go down those steps.
Oh, Dr. Kirkland.
Mrs. Scott.
You are very punctual.
Thank you for coming.
Of course. Shall we go in?
Yes.
So I want to move on to another scene, sort of another intro where you've got the Scotts arriving at the Van Ryn house. Now, this is the first time we've seen them in this environment. And, this scene, I love this scene. I love how you stage the scene where you've got Mr. Scott wanting to walk up the stairs and go right through the front door because they are invited guests. And then you've got Mrs. Scott going down to the servants' quarter because that was the tradition of the time. Talk to me about staging that sequence and kind of reinforcing the themes of that moment.
Yeah, I think what you said is absolutely right. They are, in this neighborhood, which, is a very white neighborhood, and they're coming in. And just that, do we go to the servants' entrance? Do we go through the front door? And really, the stance that he takes in this entire sort of sequence around what it means to come into this home. And I also think it mirrors the role of the man and the woman also, which I have with Aurora and Charles Fain, where they're on the stairs as well, where it's really a man's world, right? And the man is, making these kinds of decisions. And so then, of course, when Dr. Kirkland comes and the two men go up the stairs, well, she has no choice but to follow at that point, and so I think that just the difference, it's a nice way of showing that relationship on many levels of race and sex.
Yes. And I love that the script gives them the opportunity as they leave that, and they're, of course they're concerned when they arrive because Peggy's fallen ill. They're happier when they leave because he's has taken care of her. They're reassured that she's okay, and they have that wonderful little moment in the carriage where they're laughing about this is the first time that they've ever had a black man in their house or a black couple in their house or something like that.
Yeah. And their awareness of the situation. And I love how he's calling out Agnes like over and over, just like, you're a smart woman. Why would you assume that? There's this confrontation that's happening that's very unnerving in the best way, right? I just love his position in those scenes with her. It's very powerful, really.
I have a vision. A railroad that will transform this country, and perhaps the world.
An illusory vision.
I want to connect all the major cities of America, to create a continuous line, from New York to Chicago, and then from Chicago to California, without 10 stops along the way. It can be done.
Perhaps. But you say it too easily. This will be a feat to rival Moses parting the Red Sea. You think you have a problem getting round Morenci. Well, till you start trying to rearrange Chicago.
It's ambitious, yes. But neither of us would be who we are today without ambition.
Moving to another scene that I thought was very visually striking, and I wanted to kind of pick your brain about this. This is the conversation between George Russell and J.P. Morgan, played by Bill Camp here. Of course, George Russell's played by Morgan Spector. And you've got these two giants of industry meeting in the very traditional man's room where it's dark paneled wooding, it's very dark lighting. But there's a subtle difference in the way that you shoot J.P. Morgan and the way that you're shooting George Russell. J.P. Morgan is framed with the silver tea service there, but it's a very dark scene. It's not lit from behind it all. But George Russell has the stained glass lighting coming in from behind. Is that just a matter of how the room was structured? What did you want to convey with the way you staged those characters?
I think the room where they're sitting in the room is really dictated by it being George's office. Those are his stained glass windows behind his desk that have his initials on them. It's Bob's design. That's his desk, that's his arena. And so he's positioned on that side of the room. JP Morgan across from him. I think the thing for me about just the visual language of it is, JP Morgan's lighting that cigar, the fire that you have sort of when he, behind him, it's across from both of them, but in the shots, it's behind him. And I wanted this feeling George is playing with fire here, right? He really is playing with fire. The way he's gambling here, the gamble, the risks that he's taking in this particular, pursuit of his dream for the railroad is playing with fire. And so that was sort of the visual. And I think to your point about it being dark behind JP Morgan, in order for the flames to work that dark, we're not going to light that strongly. But I love how, it reminds me of last season as well, how you're always seeing, if I do my job right, people can put meaning onto the scenes. And I love how you're always culling so much meaning out of things that I'm I wish I'd come up with a really great plan for that. Or an answer for that. But what was your feeling about what did it convey to you? I'm just curious.
I've always thought of, and maybe this because I like the actor quite a bit, Morgan Spector, but I always thought of George Russell as the nice robber baron, and everybody else is the JP Morgans, they're the really bad guys, and he does bad things, but he's a nice guy too, because he's got that great relationship with Bertha. It's interesting that you say he's playing with fire, because you're right, he's jeopardizing their entire financial stability with this deal to build this railroad across the country, and to
Right.
to try to in go into these partnerships with these men who are also equally incredibly wealthy, and he could risk everything. And it's so, I say he's the nice one. It's so ironic that, later on in the season, he gets so mad at Bertha for her ambition. And yet
Right.
his ambition and his putting the family in jeopardy is totally fine. But,
Right.
but anyway, we will
Put the
probably
guy
talk about
high
that.
on the steps and the woman at the bottom, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's, even though this is a show about women and women in social power, they don't have the authority and the agency that the men in this world do.
No, not at all.
The truth is, Aurora, you will not convince me to change my mind. Our marriage is over.
You do understand that I will be finished when the news gets out.
I should have sent Robeson for the clothes. I will next time.
You'd prefer to send your valet rather than risk being in my presence?
Please don't make me say things I'll regret. I want a divorce. I need you to accept that.
I'm to accept the end of my world, with the sky crashing to earth in flames. Don't you care at all?
You talked about the Fains. The most heartbreaking moment of this season has been watching Kelly O'Hara as Aurora Fain lose everything, have her heart broken again and again and again after every episode. Later on, sent to Newport, because that's where women go when they're not in a respectable state, right?
Yeah.
So I do want to talk more about that scene where Charles comes home after, because he's been staying at the club, which I imagine is the club is. I would love to see what that looks like, but he's come home to get some clothes, and she thinks he's come home because he's coming home, and he's not, and he's so very cruel to her, like in a way that he's never been before. You talked about him being positioned on that stair high up in that position of authority. Talk to me about working with the actors and kind of, making this. I would imagine that it would be delicate to not want to make this come across as him just being a complete monster. Like, how do you find that delicate boundary between, yes, he's doing something that's very harmful, but he's still a society gentleman. He's not going to, strike her or something like that. How do you find that balance?
Well, I think both of these actors knew what was going on here in this scene. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's really about how can I stage it for them so they can go all the way with it. And I think by putting him at that distance and also at that height, mm-hmm. it really takes care of that,
sure,
issue of, distance with his rejection rather than up close in her face, right?
Yeah.
And I think also it gives the longing of Aurora space to really reach. And so just giving them that, they could really run with it. I think, Kelly just knew deeply, like, what was needed of her, and she gave all of it here. And I think, Ward's such a nice guy that I think that's going to always come through anyway. And that's what you want to do with actors. Like, if they've already got that essence in them, you can trust it's going to be there, right? And so that's already there. And he's actually having to play against his own personal, type, which adds that tension in there anyway for a performer, right? It's, I don't think his natural inclination. And so to have to lean into that has the underneath of what a good guy he actually is, right? So I think that comes together and creates what you're sensing in terms of the societal, he's a gentleman all the same, even though, as you said, he's being so cool here. When someone's breaking it off, you have to stay so strong, right? He has to stay so committed to his decision, which comes across as cruel and comes across as cold. It is, I think, for the actor, for the character, self-preservation, right? It's like
Mhm.
he's made this decision. He can't let her get him back. He
Right.
could pull back so easily by her heart.
Yeah.
So he has to resist that. And his resistance, of course, comes across as utterly cruel and cold, but I don't think that's how the actor is playing it, right?
And which is so interesting, she's wearing her emotions on her sleeve so dramatically in a way that women of that time would not. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
they're behind closed doors, of course, between
Right.
husband and wife. So the guards are down, but and thinking about her on the bottom of that stairs and that longing looking up the stairs. What is it about staircases and women? Because it's almost, it reminds me a little bit of Gone with the Wind with Scarlett O'Hara on that staircase.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of that, but
It just dawned on me just as you said it. I'm like, why do we have a thing there? um
right. I don't know. I'll think about that. Come up with an answer for you.
it's a beautiful exchange. It's painful, and I love how you start that scene with her in her office or something at a desk, and there's
Yeah.
the window, and you shot down the hall, and she's framed in that tight space as if the walls are closing in around her, and
Yeah.
it
And
it just
very
makes her feel so
alone, very
delicate.
isolated. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
Thanks
it's
for noticing that. Yeah.
yeah, it's really great work in terms of the season, and then the performances are, as usual, are so fantastic. I mean, you've got a whole cast of Broadway theater trained actors. Of course, they know what they're doing. um, Speaking of actors, you also have the great fortune of working with Morgan Spector and, of course, Carrie Coon as George and Bertha Russell. And this 2 seasons, they're joined at the hip. They're moving forward together as a couple. And this season, we start to see a little bit of that fray. And I know those actors are such great friends, and of course they're consummate actors, but it must have been difficult for them to start to fray at the seams a little bit there in their relationship and their marriage, and to have fight scenes. And they don't normally have those. I think I can count 2 maybe for the rest of the show, but this one, there's a lot that's going on in this season in the Russell marriage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's I think it's fun. Talk about cruelty. It's kind of cruel to our audience, right? Because everyone loves them as a couple. To start to see this like conflict. Yeah.
I've seen the whole season, and I've seen some comments that I'm not spoiling anything, but I've seen some comments. I'm like, people are gonna. There's some things coming up at the end of the season.
Absolutely. What makes it work, I think, and like you said, they're friends and there's this natural connection between them. And I think, rather than leading them as actors into like the discord between them, you're really leading the actors into their individual dreams that are suddenly in different directions, right? And so like with Bertha in that scene in the bedroom, for us, for her and I, Carrie and I, it was really about Bertha's own, like we were talking about, it's like Bertha's the 16-year-old, 18-year-old. It's like she's projecting everything onto Gladys now. And I really wanted to show Bertha's own dreams, right? This is Bertha's dream, and that young, hopeful, like, I want to marry the Duke feeling of hers, right? And so that there's a vulnerability there in this conflict. It's her own it's not like she's trying to hurt Gladys. She's trying to fulfill her own inner, like, teenager longing herself, right? And to go as far as we could into her dream, right? And then simultaneously with George, his own heart around his daughter and his promise to his daughter and his promise to, support her in marrying who she loved. And so that promise is where his, dream is. And so leading them both into the, dreams that, are taking them further apart rather than, we have to do a fight scene. It's more about leading them each into their hearts, which are separating a bit.
There you are.
His Grace, the Duke of Buckingham.
Mr. and Mrs. Russell, How nice to see you.
Hector,
I'm sorry I'm so late.
you're right on time.
I hope you had an easy journey.
It was long, and then we were delayed.
We?
Yes, I brought along my attorney, Mr. Dobbs.
You've brought a lawyer.
Well, I suppose we still have some things to talk about.
And of course you remember Gladys.
Gladys, we have much to look forward to.
And poor Gladys, you played by Tessa Farmiga. I love how you close the episode with everybody's finally caught up to Bertha, because Bertha's been steps and steps, miles ahead even, and they're finally starting to catch up and see. And the episode closes with a very quick take of them going in for dinner with the Duke, because the Duke has arrived. And she just, the camera, I think the last shot is the camera of her looking up at her father, and she is completely terror stricken. Like, what is happening? I love that shot.
Yeah. And I think it begins outside with Billy, right? Like, she is not expecting Billy to end this, and that heartbreak there. And then I just love that moment when she collapses into Larry's arms. And, it's that moment where the kid, falls at kindergarten, scrapes their knee, and they're fine. And then mom appears and they like break down. And like that, it's what that moment with Larry really felt like to me. So young, so brokenhearted, and then going up, putting on the like good face as best she can to only be confronted with, as you said, Bertha's plan, and just how out of control she is of her life, and the promises that were made to her, and how it's all suddenly just flipped completely. And I think all of them played that final moment so beautifully, but she's just wow, I just find her so compelling at the end of that episode.
Absolutely. And the last thing I kind of want to comment on is there's a lot about ambition between George and Bertha, and and it's period accurate, but she is being faulted for having ambition, social ambition. Now, granted, she's playing with her children's lives a little bit, and that there are some issues with that for sure. But I get the feeling that George isn't necessarily. I mean, George loves his daughter, but I think George is also like, oh, you're becoming more powerful than me, and I'm not liking this. Like, I feel like if he had made that decision to marry her off to the Duke, that it would have been okay for him. But but it's because it was Bertha, because Bertha's asserting her authority over the family. I don't think he's okay with that. Would that be your take on it as well?
Yeah, and also she crossed a line. Like when they're in the bedroom, he says, when am I going to have a say in my daughter's life? And she says, when I have a say in the boardroom, right?
It's the best line of the episode.
Great. And then she actually crosses a line, because she promised the Duke things that that's the boardroom, right? Like the money piece of it and the negotiation of that. She made some promises that weren't hers in George's mind and in that society's mind to make, right? So she did cross over, right? And he asks her point blank in the bedroom, like, have you told me everything? And she has not told him everything. And he finds that out in this final scene. And, and she's like, well, now, he says, you said you told me everything. She's like, now, and so I think yes, absolutely. It's that Bertha would, like, if George made this decision, of course it would go. But I think the tension also comes from her crossing that line. They have each of their domains, and she stepped into his with this, what seems like her domain, but she moved it into his and took over, really.
Right. Because it becomes a financial decision ultimately at one point.
That's right.
So, all right. Last question for you. What was your favorite moment of this episode?
That's an impossible question to answer, because there are just so many. I mean, we've touched upon them, really. One we didn't touch upon was when Larry pulls Marion into the carriage, which
yes,
and they're making out in the carriage. I love that. That was fun. and
Shot
shooting
through
that
that little
through,
peephole, or
yeah. So it felt like what's it called? The thing you put on your the women wear. I'm forgetting. It's
a cameo.
Yes, it felt like you were looking like it felt like a little cameo of the two lovers, and anyway, I love that shot. I loved that scene. So I would put that in there with all of the ones we've spoken to of Adelheid, running down the hall, and Gladys collapsing in Larry's arms. They're just I love the scene that we spoke of Bertha and George in the bedroom. So there are just so many of them in this episode that were just such a pleasure to get to sink our teeth into, and shooting away both the performances and the shots that really leaned into how we're raising the stakes of this season. So
Absolutely.
A lot of fun.
And there's much more fun and stakes raising to come this season.
It just gets more and more intense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today to talk about episode 2. And I believe that we'll be speaking again when you come back to direct episode 5 and 6.
Yeah, I can't wait, Clarence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah.